Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 270 library systems across the United States and Canada with the goal of making author talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator, in conversation with each of the wonderful, best-selling, and highly acclaimed authors that you hear from throughout our Author Talk series year-round. Today, we are honored and excited to have New York Times bestselling author and cartoonist Kate Beaton with us to talk about her graphic memoir, Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands. Thanks for being here, Kate.
No problem. Thank you.
I'm super excited to dive in, but before we begin, let me get that housekeeping information out of the way that lets everything run a little more smoothly, and then we will learn a lot more about our guest. We have compiled some viewer questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but of course we are also taking your additional questions throughout this conversation. So when you have a direct question for Kate, you can click that questions button below the live stream video at any time to submit your question. You can click it right now if you have a question right now. In addition, we invite you to interact with your fellow viewers in the live chat box, also located below this live stream. It's always fun to see where everybody's tuning in from. If you're unable to attend the full talk for any reason, you will receive a thank you for attending email in about 24 hours. And in that email, you'll find a link to the recording. Now, to formally introduce our guest for this evening. Kate Beaton was born and raised in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Canada. After graduating from Mount Allison University with a double degree in history and anthropology, she moved to Alberta in search of work that would allow her to pay down her student loans. During the years she spent out west, Beaton began creating webcomics under the name Hark, a Vagrant, quickly drawing a substantial following around the world. The collections of her landmark strip, Hark, a Vagrant, and Step Aside Pops, each spent several months on the New York Times graphic novel bestseller list, as well as appearing on Best of the Year lists from Time, The Washington Post, Vulture, NPR Books, and winning the Eisner, Ignatz Harvey, and Doug Wright Awards. She's also published the picture books King Baby and The Princess and the Pony. Beaton lives in Cape Breton with her family. Again, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you this evening?
I'm good, thanks. The kids have just gone to bed, so hopefully no interruptions. We'll see.
We'll try to keep the raucousness down during this talk and see if we can make it work. So I know to get started, one of the first things that I like to do is kind of ask you to give an overview of Ducks, because it's a pretty good mix of people who've read it and who haven't read it yet but are interested in doing so.
Well, the easiest explanation is that Ducks is a graphic novel, a memoir of the 2 years that I spent working in the oil sands in Fort McMurray. But that is very surface level. It's about a lot of things. It's an exploration of class and labor and gender and environment and corporations, capitalism, how we treat each other in isolation and mental health, Indigenous rights. There's so much that you take in when you are involved in one of the largest industries in North America. When you're observing it firsthand, and it's mostly, it's a lot about the things that I couldn't forget when I left, that stayed on my mind, and so I feel like it was a book that I was always going to make because those memories were so vivid, and I tried to speak to a lot of things through just bearing witness.
And you wove such heavy topics together so brilliantly and beautifully and entertaining. So thank you for that. I mean, the book was wonderful.
Thank you.
Anna is asking, so after working on Hark, a Vagrant, and many other projects over the last several years, I know, so you just said that these were kind of just memories that stayed with you, but what was the actual impetus that got you writing such a deeply personal memoir? Was there one?
I don't know if there was one. I mean, a very long time ago, there was a comic even on Hark, Vagrant that was in the oil sands. And it's in Ducks, Christmas comic, and it sticks out on Hark, Vagrant. And you're like, why is this here? But I put it there because I felt like making it. It was on my mind, and I made it. And Hark, Vagrant was kind of a weird exercise, and it never really. It was about history and literature and stuff, but it was also about very random things. Um, and so there was one comic there set in the oil sands that was a autobiographical. But in 2014, I just started drawing. Um, for no particular reason. I was in my studio and I started drawing the panels, and I started drawing it out and being like, why not? Why not just draw this? And once I had drawn it, I put it up to see if people responded to it well, I guess, and they did. And once they did, I knew that I had something there that could carry a book. But when I could make it, and knowing that like a book is an entirely different thing than putting up a couple of strips, that was the question. I had never attempted a long form narrative before, and that was very daunting. Um, and it took a long time to do it. It was uh, I, I wasn't sure if I could do it well. I wasn't sure if I could do the subject justice. When you care about something so much that you want to do it the right way, you want to. If I put it out there and people were like, this doesn't really reflect what I seen or what I saw or what I felt or what I experienced, I would have felt like another failure. So it was so important for me to get it right, and I was very nervous about doing it. So it took a long time.
That reminds me of the scene or the in the book where Lindsay puts her article out there, and there are all these different comments. And it's like I can't
Yes.
imagine. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
if you
that's a
would have,
bit.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That was a bit different. That was our first. Now Lindsay's a journalist with CBC. She actually does like documentaries and things. She's worked her way up with CBC, and she's the host of Atlantic Voice in Newfoundland, and has had a wonderful career. But the first time that you put something out online, it's quite alarming to realize that people will just say like insane things to you, invalidate you. This is your own story, and you're telling your version of it, and people will just write, no, no, you're wrong. This is bullshit. and on such a polarizing topic as the oil sands, which they always have been, the most alarming thing there was that it was coming from other women. I think that was the most surprising thing for us at that time, to put up something and be like, it's women like you who ruin this for everybody else, and I just put up my nightlight in my room and my life is fine. I never experienced sexism in the camp, so you must be wrong. Um, you're not prepared for that kind of backlash. If you can think back to the first time that you were on the internet, really engaging with strangers, because we're all so used to it now. We are all extremely aware of what comment sections are like, and what Twitter is like, and what all of these things are like. But this was 2008. This was before we were all so heavily engaged, and if we were online, our world was very small. It wasn't. It usually wasn't involved in much more than things like a few message boards, or a small circle of friends. That was this book takes place really on the doorstep of mass kind of like social media that we're all so entrenched in today that it's almost nothing to expect, just a slurry pile of strangers talking garbage to you. But you if you're my age, or say you might be able to remember the first time that really hit you like a truck. I don't even know where I started with that comment.
I was just mentioning that it kind of, your comment about putting it out there and seeing if people didn't feel the same way that you did about it, then maybe you wouldn't have
Oh
written
yeah,
the book.
yeah,
Saying, well, that
yes,
sounds like
yeah.
Lindsay, like being so surprised that people didn't feel the same way, especially other women.
Yes, yeah. For me, for putting the book out, it was more like, if I can't do this justice, I don't want to do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are already so many misrepresentations of working in the oil sands. Even in my time there were so many supposed sort of journalistic exposés of going out there. There was one by the Rolling Stones, that's a band, Rolling Stone magazine, and others who came, and they were like, we're gonna get undercover here and show you the real Fort McMurray. But it was just a bunch of journalists who came with a agenda that they already kind of had before they even showed up, and they stayed in a hotel for a week or two, and they interviewed like the people who worked at Moxie's restaurant or something, and a couple of like guys sitting in trucks, and they kind of confirmed their prejudices and left. And you really get that sense from reading what they have to say. It's it's no wonder that the people in the town of Fort McMurray are quite suspicious of media coming in and having something to say about the town, because they're used to what feels like just uh, very biased reporting on them. And to in defense of those journalists, it's very difficult to get into. You can't get on an oil site without a pass. The gates are locked, and if you do get on if you do get into the oil site, it's with like a tour guide from the company, like from Suncor, some like Suncor PR man taking you around, and that's really gonna give you some insight. That's gonna be like the PR view of things, to be like, look at the great things we have, and look at these happy workers. We're doing amazing things here, don't you think? Write that down. That's the only journalists that get in. So it's not easy. It's not easy to get a real look at things.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of not easy, I have a hard time imagining how I would write about myself at the age of 22, going back. So, what was it like writing and kind of drawing this younger version of yourself? Was it difficult, or did you find it easy?
I didn't find it hard. I have like a lot of emails and G chats and things from that time, and
Sure.
you're quite naive, and embarrassing a lot of the time. You look at the things, and plus I was writing Hark, Vagrant. I started it halfway through the book. There's quite a footprint for me at that age, and part of the reason that I wanted to shut down Hark, Vagrant was because it started when I was in my early 20s, and I just didn't feel like that person anymore. I had grown past that, but on the internet, everything exists in the now. And it doesn't matter if something was put online in 2007. If it exists, people are, it feels like if it's on the website that you're using right now, it's sort of like attached to you as a 40-year-old, even though you made it when you were 23. And there's a lot of growth since then, but I can recall being that person. I can recall having those thoughts and those feelings and that sense of humor that I feel like is of that time. It wasn't too hard to tap into. Besides that moment in time in Fort McMurray for me was so vivid. It stands out in such stark contrast to any other place that I've ever lived. I couldn't tell you. Oh, there's a cat. I couldn't tell you much in great detail about times that I lived as a young person in Halifax, Toronto, New York, day to day, in the same way that I could in Fort McMurray, because it was just that specific. I think it would be harder for me to write a memoir of those times compared to Fort McMurray, but it wasn't that difficult for that place somehow.
I can imagine. I mean, having read the book, and like many of the scenes in your book stick with me, and they didn't happen to me. So having actually lived through that, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some quite like visceral feelings, like even the temperature. I've never been that cold anywhere else. I've never worked night shifts anywhere else. I've never had visuals like that anywhere else. So it's just in so much stark contrast.
Mm-hmm. Was there a catharsis getting it all out?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's several moments of trauma and tragedy that happen in the book, and dealing with those. I've dealt with them many times in my life, but dealing with them narratively by writing and then drawing and then parsing them out creates a kind of a distance where you're looking at them as a writer, and like from sort of like standing above them. It's a different perspective, and it's very helpful. I recommend making a graphic novel of all of your worst moments to help you deal with them.
So Cicely is asking, please, for those of us who haven't read the book yet, can you explain what the oil sands are and what controversy they create?
Sure. Well, the oil sands are oil deposits in northern Alberta. They're one of the largest oil reserves in the world, but unlike oil that you imagine coming out in Texas, where I always say like Jed Clampett oil, where like he shoots the ground and the oil just bubbles up. It's bitumen, which is oil sand. It's oil that is it's mixed in with sand in this kind of like northern boreal wetland, and so in order to refine it to make it into usable oil, you mine it from the ground, and the extraction process to make it into like oil that we would use is so much more energy heavy than anywhere else, that it's controversial because it costs a lot to make it. And it costs so much that oil itself has to be expensive enough. The price of oil has to be expensive enough to make it worth going to mining for in the first place. And then also it's so energy heavy to refine it, to mine it, and then to extract, to separate it from the sand, and then to refine it so many times over to make it oil. Because bitumen is this like very sticky, oily, sandy substance that is quite tactile. And there are a number of ways that you can do it. You can either mine mine, like scoop it up and then refine it, or you can use steam injection, which is you're squirting gross, like hot steam into the earth. And the idea is like the steam will like separate like the oil from the sand, and like the oil will heat up and rise, which is supposed to be better, like more, I don't know, but it's not. Nothing's better for the environment. That comes up in the book a couple times because that was kind of new when I was there, and people were like, "This is better." Whoa, there's a child. Hello. Hi, Mary. Hi, Mary. You're supposed to be in bed, honey. Yeah. Yeah, because Daddy's not finished putting Charlie to bed. Okay, you can sit right here and wait for Daddy to finish. You have to stay very quiet, okay? Okay, good girl. This is my daughter, Mary. You can say hi. 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 Mary's 3. 3. She's 3. Yeah. Okay. You stay right there. When Daddy's done putting Charlie to bed, he'll come get you. Okay. I'm sorry you were all alone up there. It's tough. Tough being 3.
It is tough.
Sorry. But anyway, that's why they're controversial.
Okay. So Diane is asking, how did you choose the structure for ducks? But I kind of want to expand on that a little bit by saying that I love that you give a cast of characters at the beginning of each section. It was really helpful to be able to refer back and make note of where they were and who I liked and didn't like. So I was kind of bored. But you have so many different characters in the book, like so many different characters in the book. How did you keep them all straight? Were there challenges, like organizationally or even drawing so many different characters for one story?
Oh yeah, there were challenges for sure. And I took that cast of characters before each chapter from a book called Onward Towards Our Noble Deaths by I want to pronounce this right, Shigeru Mizuki, which is a book that Drona Quarterly translated. But he was drawing this is like a wartime book. I forget if it was World War I or World War II, but they were Japanese soldiers, and everybody was wearing the same uniform, right? So it was very helpful to have that cast of characters because of the similar uniforms. And in the same way, in my book, everybody's wearing the same hard hat, vest, glasses. So even if you have defining facial features, it gets, even in real life, it was difficult to tell them apart a lot of the time when they're coming up with like full glasses, hats, safety vests, the whole works, and so many of them had like mustaches and stuff. And you would see them after work without any of that stuff on, and you'd be like, I don't know who you are because I only see you with your hats on. Like I don't know what your hair looks like. Okay, Mary. Anyway, so I needed something to help the readers along, because if it's difficult in real life, it's going to be difficult in person. And I'm not an amazing caricaturist. I'm not an amazing cartoonist. I have strengths, but like variety, I wouldn't say is one of my strong suits. In like, I tend to like start like something and then by habit just start simplifying the shapes no matter what like design I started with, so that everybody's faces started sort of looking similar. And then my editors would catch me on that and be like, all these faces are looking the same again. And I would have to reel back and start fixing them so that they started looking different. But that's just me. So, I look at some things that other people do and I'm like, God, I wish that I could just have that specificity in character design, the way that this person does, where they, it seems so effortless for them. And it feels so hard for me because I just naturally like start like, weaning things down to simple shapes again. And I wish I didn't do that. But if anybody here is a cartoonist, you know, everybody has their struggles with things, and that's definitely one of mine. Oh no! Mary went back upstairs. I'm sorry. This bedtime time is a tough one for sure.
Yeah.
Mary, are you okay?
Okay. Oh.
Her dad is coming out. I think the baby finally fell asleep, so I think her dad is. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, for those listening, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and usually we each have to take one to bed, but one we had to put the 1-year-old to bed first, and now the 3-year-old. But I think the 1-year-old's asleep, so now my husband can take the 3-year-old. So, okay, sorry.
Well, I apologize for busting into their bedtime. I know how difficult that is. At least we color coordinated.
Yes, we did. We both have our sparkly black sweaters on. And so, you also have a child in the background. I know you told me.
I do. Mine is currently. I'm an hour behind you. So she's currently doing dinner time and bedtime soon. But at least she's distracted with food at the moment. So, so you say that you have difficulty kind of just going back to the same shapes, but I found it very interesting that you were able to convey such emotion and expression in all of these different faces. I thought it was incredible. But I also found your landscapes to be very powerful throughout the whole book.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of references for those.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be like what
those weren't like from memory or anything. I had folders and folders of images that I was using because I was gathering for the longest time. I was gathering things from like of that time because of the places where I worked. They look a lot different now than they did in 2005 to 2008. So I was gathering whatever I could find, you know, of that time, because both Long Lake and Albion Sands were under construction when I was there. So if you see images of them now, they look a lot different. And Syncrude, I imagine, looks somewhat similar because it was so old. But I was trying to be as correct as I could from using images of that time, and also the vehicles that were in use of that time. Like I couldn't use, you know, you're trying to like what. In fact, 1 second, I'll show you my little. Everything's breaking in this house tonight. I've got the kids broke the wheel off of this. This is a Ford F-150.
Yeah, that looks reminiscent of my youth.
Yeah, you bet. Everyone loves. This is full of acorns, but it is a 797 F. It is actually bigger than this one, even though the model's bigger, the 777D. But you know, you're going to be fine. What's that?
I recognize that from the book.
Yeah. Yes. This is one of the bigger ones, and I think this is on the cover. So
yes.
It's very much yes, and it's if you want some acorns. But like like the oil sands is one of the only places that has one of these. This is one of the biggest mining trucks that was in the world at that time, and like you would only stand up. You would only be up to like the axle on this wheel. It was huge. It was unbelievable, and these it's crazy what you can find models of, for sure. Like this is a 2006 Ford F-150. Definitely people are like, I need one of those. I did.
I think there are still quite a few out on the road, actually.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
and I have a few other models like that I had a bus to draw those diversified buses and stuff just because there were so many. I'm not that good at drawing cars, all that stuff freehand. I could never do. I had to use a lot of reference for this book. Anyway.
Well, so kind of take it back to the beginning for a second. Ducks opens in Cape Breton with you explaining the tension that no one stays in Cape Breton, the tension between loving your home and having to leave it. But during
Yeah.
your time in the oil sands, some of the most poignant and powerful moments, both good and bad, are kind of interactions that you have with people from Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and Cape Breton.
Mhm.
Did you
Yeah.
originally anticipate this memoir as being kind of about Cape Breton as well as about your time in the oil sands? Because it kind of seemed like it was a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah. I like, um, there's a long history of labor migration here. There's no separating like the fact that I went out there and that people here went out there
Mhm,
with with the history, the long memory of labor and moving away for work, um, that exists here. The difference between my generation when I was leaving was that the choices were so slim. In that, like, the industries were under, like, it was just complete decimation. It was bleak. Um, in my parents' time, things were bad, and in my grandparents' time, things were, people were leaving, but there were also people staying, and in my time, it was, like, complete annihilation.
mhm.
And and so that was going to be a part of it for sure. When, like, uh, I don't know how to explain it really, but, like, Fort McMurray wasn't just like sometimes people read the book and they still sort of talk about, like, this is where people were going to make quick money. This is where people were going to, like, um, uh, make fast cash and big bucks or whatever. Uh, and that's true for some people, for sure. Like, that existed. But, like, around home and in other places as well, like places in Newfoundland, um, it was the only option for a lot of people. Like, there were no jobs. The local industries were just gone. They were utterly gone. And it wasn't a question of, like, is there work in a different town? There wasn't. Or could you go to Halifax? Like, not even Halifax. You couldn't go anywhere. This was the only place where people logically understood that there was a job. Um, and so, uh, and a lot of people didn't want to go. Um, and and so that baggage is in the book as well. Uh, like, for those of you, I think there's a lot of Americans here. Um, yes, in the
Yeah.
audience. Like, I never got to get too much into it, but, like, there's a lot of fishermen from Newfoundland, and in 1992, you had the cod moratorium, which is when they ended the cod fishery in Newfoundland, and that was the largest layoff in Canadian history. 40,000 people lost their job overnight,
Wow.
which is it decimated the entire province, and they still haven't fully recovered from it. So that's when you have people like Ambrose and the younger fishermen there, and like they're still mourning that loss. But it came with its own strange set of things because there was such big money to be had out in Fort McMurray in a way that you didn't see um, in other industries that people migrated to in previous generations. People did go to places like, working in mining in Sudbury or in car factories in Ontario, whatever. But the money that was happening in Fort McMurray at that time was so bananas that it exceeded so much of the wealth that anybody ever had in any of those other industries. So you had these young people that grew up poor in all of these places going there and all of a sudden earning well beyond anything their parents ever earned. And then on the flip side, like people who lost everything going there and they'd rather not. It was a very odd mix of things happening. I'm sorry, I'm going off now, and I better put the brakes on. But that whole scene with the older fisherman Ambrose and the younger guys from Newfoundland was kind of emblematic of that generational oddity, I think, of somebody who lost everything, who had to go there, and these younger guys who grew up after all of that and out of high school making 6 figures a year, which is just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine making that much money right out of high school. It's no wonder that much of the behavior that is discussed in the book of immaturity and lewdness taking place.
They all toys and stuff. They all had like all these like trucks and skidoos and ATVs and things, and they couldn't see the end of it. They couldn't like imagine not having that much money ever. And then of course nothing does last forever. The oil prices went down again, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and people who had spent unwisely didn't know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot I really couldn't get into very, very much in the book. There's a lot that like is sort of just like brought up and kind of like left because there's not enough room to explore every single issue the way that you could if you had time. But the book is already like 500 pages. So.
But
Anyway.
don't let that daunt you, anyone, because you can't put it down. So the title Ducks is based on an incident that took place in, I think, 2008, which we learn about kind of midway through the book, kind of where the title comes from. Can you talk more about this and when did you know that was going to be the title?
Well, it was the title of the original comic in 2014. So it was always the working title of the book. But I thought I'd keep it. I thought I'd keep it because it made sense to me. But the incident is in 2008, hundreds of ducks flew into the tailings pond at Syncrude and died. And it was the first time that the eyes of the world turned really to the oil sands, and we're like, I don't like what's going on there. And before then, people had been, vaguely aware. They had been aware of what had been, the happenings of the oil sands, the methods, and the money, all of that. But the ducks were a real turning point in the optics of the oil sands. And the oil companies themselves, like the president of Syncrude or whatever, had to come out on camera and apologize, and they were fined like a sum that they could pay, and they were like, we're sorry that this happened, it's awful that this happened, and they had to put in preventative measures so it wouldn't happen again. and people were furious about it and demanded sort of justice for these ducks. And I had worked in Syncrude before that, but I was working in Albion Sands, which is a Shell company, and Shell was like, we need to put in noisemakers so it doesn't happen here. We don't want that happening here. That would look bad. They were all very concerned that it wouldn't happen there because that nobody wanted to be caught, doing the same thing. But it was very hypocritical. I mean, it was like, you think this is the only animal that's ever been harmed by the oil sands operations? And this is, by that point in the book, you had seen a lot of people in crisis that no one cared about. The companies did not care about. The companies were extremely concerned about the optics of their safety records, and how if you went on to any of their websites, it'd be like, what a great place to work, and it was super diverse. Lots of smiling women, lots of smiling people of color. But of course, the reality is lots of harassment and racism. The companies coming out and saying things like, we're so sorry this happened. We're going to do everything we can. This, taking ownership of what happened to the ducks, when at the same time, the indigenous people in places like Fort McKay, Fort Chipewyan, are saying that like they are dying of rare cancers that are definitely caused by oil sands operations, and the oil companies will not take responsibility for that at all. And in fact, the doctor at the same year, that very same time, Dr. John O'Connor, who was the physician at Fort Chipewyan, was saying that we really need to raise the alarm here because people are getting sick and they're dying. Instead of having like the government being like, oh my God, we need to do something, they were like, you are causing stress and you're making everyone look bad, and they fired him. But the ducks caused everyone to be like, oh my God. Like, can you imagine people you love dying and having no one own up to the reasons why and have them deny and deflect. But then when like these birds die, because we all like ducks, because like they're like, somehow they're like an animal that we're like, oh yes, we like those. Have the oil company come out and like, cap in hand, like apologetically, you'd be like, fuck off. Pardon my language on this. The kids are in bed.
It's an adult
but
program.
yeah, it's after hours cuss fest. And at the same time as well, they were catching fish in the river that had cancerous lesions on them, and they would bring them out and be like, these fish have like cancerous lesions on them. And like, you should have seen the like people bend over backwards to be like, that's not happening. That's not what that is. It's something else. That the water's drinkable. And just take people's words and try and just be like, no, that's not what it is. It's disgusting, and it's so Canadian. But the image of the oil covered ducks made everyone's heart like bleed. That is so hypocritical that I just blah. And the metaphor is there as well, of these migratory animals, who landed in a place they thought was safe, and it wasn't. And that felt true to me for a lot of the workers, because who would go there knowing that your life was going to be ruined in one way or the other, that you were going to fall prey to addiction or violence, in a way that a lot of the workers did, and that there would be no solution or nobody there for you. And there's a quote somewhere in the book where I remember talking to someone who was just like, this place is the divorce capital of the country at that point. And that was a well-known statistic, that Fort McMurray was the divorce capital of the country. because of all the fly in, fly out and everything, and that lifestyle was so hard on families. It was hard on the kids, it was hard on the marriages, and I was like, "Why would you come here knowing that this would ruin your life?" And my boss was like, "Why would anyone think it would happen to them?"
Mhm. I remember that.
Anyway, so the Dark as the title just, I hope, invited a lot of sort of interrogation of those ideas.
Mhm. Darby is saying, I recently read your graphic memoir, Ducks, and found all of the topics that you explore, from sexism in the workplace to classism to addiction to everything in between, incredibly engaging. But I was particularly moved by the environmental issues brought up in relation to the oil sands and pollution of the nearby native communities, which we've kind of touched on just a bit. Um, and mentioning your afterword of the book is so powerful. You kind of, when you give thanks to Selena Harp, an elder from the Cree community in Fort Mackay, allowing
Mhm.
her to use her likeness and her words, um, I just thought that it was beautiful. And then the subsequent paragraphs about the indigenous peoples that are surrounding the area. So Darby's question is, how do you how did it impact how you approached your work or explain the necessity of having the job to others? So in other words, what does it feel like to balance environmentalism that it sounds like you're so very passionate about now with needing to support yourself with a lucrative job? Is this kind of like what woke you up to that, or were you always super passionate about environmentalism?
Well, there are two Kates. There's the young person in the book who is, quite naive in a lot of ways, has a lot to learn. And there is myself, the 39-year-old author who has a lot of experience, world experience, who has read a lot and experienced much more. Um, and at that time, half of the book, especially, I am dealing with uh, just almost a traumatic day-to-day existence where I am in the middle of this workplace where I am being harassed every day, to the point of shutting down my faculties in a lot of ways. Um, and that is, when you are that vulnerable person, um, you're not in the kind of privileged position to be like, "Whoa, what can I do about the environment?" People are acting violently towards you every day. Uh, if you've read the book, that that I experienced, like, sexual violence twice, in very extreme, sort of disturbing ways. Um, and even after that, sort of the fallout of that follows me around. In the second half of the book, I am removed from the kind of imminent danger of of that, and um, I'm able to lift my head up and look around a bit more and be like, understand what I'm seeing, corporately. Uh, uh, um, I have more access to the internet. I didn't have the internet in the first half. I remember going by Fort Mackay on my way to work one time, and I was like, "What's that place?" Like, I thought it was a mine, and someone was like, "That's a town." That's a town. Uh, I was like, "That's a town?" It's like right next to the oil, like, it's right next to Suncor, like, right there. I couldn't believe that it was a town, and someone said, "Yeah, it's like a native town," their words. And And I was like, I can't believe that it's there. And he was like, well, it was there first, but I mean, I wouldn't drink the water there. I should have put that in the book, but the book is so long. Um, but you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that. And then when you do find out, you know, uh, you can look back and say, like, my God, like, should I have just quit then? Uh, I didn't. I stayed and I worked. I had no money. Uh, and how do you reconcile the choices that you made as a young person? Um, I don't know. I left and I went back, and I went back because I I felt like I needed at that time to finish what I started because I left after being assaulted, and I needed it not to be for nothing for me, uh, somehow. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know. I could only this book is only these are such heavy questions, man. I
Sorry.
how do I like
We're also in therapy tonight, just so you know. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Like how do you deal with any of the choices that you made that you feel strongly about that you made them. You that was your life. I all I did was present what I did and the life that I lived. Um without without judgment because whatever I feel um is I guess my own thing to carry.
Yeah. I mean, the book that you wrote covers so many different heavy and nuanced topics that, I mean, that alone had to be is such a difficult thing to fathom. So, I mean, people are very engaged with it, and thank you for talking about it.
I don't know. I mean these are difficult topics. They're difficult.
Mhm.
And um knowing what I know now, I'm glad that I can put it out there. And I uh I wish I knew more at the time.
Mhm. Yeah, we have quite a few people asking Anne and Claire and Kelly if any of the oil companies or coworkers from the oil sands have commented or had anything to say or spoke out about the book.
No. I mean, my coworkers, I contacted almost all of them to tell them that they were in it, if I was in contact with them. Not all of them are even alive. Some of them have died of cancer. Some of them have died of addiction. Um, and sorry. Uh, some of that is directly related to the oil sands. But the people that I could talk to, I did. And so they knew that it was happening, and they were very supportive, and I was lucky for that. Or maybe they were just being nice to me. I don't know. Uh, but the funny thing is that when I first told my family that I was going to do it, um, they they were worried that they were worried that the oil companies would come after me.
That's a
Like, well, I think that some working class communities are very used to corporations having a lot of power to do what they want. And that fear is very real, that, like, they can shut you down in some way. Even though I was just like, "I don't give a fuck." I don't care, like, what are they if they come after me, it would be such a bad look for them anyway, so I don't care. No, they've never said anything, and they're not gonna say anything because they would look like hell if they did. Um, and, uh, and I will continue to say that they are murderers because they are, because they just they just deny their responsibility in people, in the health of their both their own workers and the community. Because anecdotally, workers also get sick. Workers also are getting cancer. And, when people are transient workers, like flying in and out from, like, different parts of the world into camps, they're not gonna get sick, you know, at work. They're gonna get cancer, like, 5 or 10 years later back home wherever they live, and no one's gonna do a study linking all of that to, like, the oil sands, because everybody lives all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, and the oil companies are gonna get away with it. Sorry, I'm a real downer.
What do you hope that readers take away from reading Ducks?
I think it depends on what they need to take away, or what I think there are a lot of people who are familiar with workplaces that are damaging and unequal and unfair and harmful to the environment, to the workforce. I think that there is I think that in the push for what we want for the environment, there is sometimes, like, uh, um, the humanity of the actual workers that work in those industries is sometimes lost when maybe we could have some more solidarity there, because they are often pushed into those jobs through necessity. Not all of them, but they are human beings with their own struggles as well. Um, and and there when we have, like, concerns about things like the indigenous lands, people seem to be, they'll be fired up for, like, a minute, but then it will die down, and they'll forget, that they cared about it yesterday, because you see that often with the communities that surround the oil sands. And I wish that I could have spoken about it to it more. I kind of feel like I I I kind of, like, I was like, well, I can't give myself more knowledge about this than I had, but maybe I could have found a different way to put more of it in there. Um, but anyway.
I want to ask one last question. We've had a couple of librarians comment about using your work to teach elementary learners, um,
Mm.
just using
To
it in
teach
the
what?
landscape. Probably not ducks, but
Oh, I
um,
was like, what?
we also had another librarian, Mark, says, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the role of graphic novels in our current landscape and going forward. Ducks is a great example of the unique way the medium can be a window into other people's experiences, but graphic novels are also receiving a lot of negative attention for this reason, like Gender Queer being the most challenged book of 2022. Any advice for a librarian on how to respond to people's criticism?
Oh, those people that just stick up their ass. Uh,
There's your advice. Good night, everyone. No.
Yeah, good. Graphic novels are like an easy target for that stuff. The same reason that like people like them, because they're so accessible. Like there are plenty of like queer novels and other literature that like no one's going after, but like often I find like you'll still go to the teen section, you'll find like graphic novels of every shade in there, and you're like, I don't think this is a teen book. And like people still are like, this is a children. I mean, I'd love to see more queer stuff in the teen section. That's not what I'm saying, but like I think that like there's something about like the accessibility of comics that people are still like think that like these are like, it's easy to pick it up and flip through and be like, oh, I don't like this somehow. And that just shows that like the person reading it is a child, not the book. You get so sick of like the same like whiny like complaints about comics, because it is the most welcoming and open and exciting genre or medium. Sorry, it's not. It's the medium where you have creators who just blew past all the gatekeeping and made names for themselves. And like you brought up like queer stuff, so I'm rolling with it. But like online especially, you saw so much of like the queer community putting up comics and like finding their own communities and putting up amazing art and becoming popular and like it's everywhere now, and it's popular and it's beautiful and it's great and like everyone loves reading it. And I don't know any other medium that has soared with queer art the way that comics has. So if I don't know how to like give advice to a librarian for that, but like people have paved their own way in comics, like with that, like no other that I can think of. And if like, and then like to put it in a book and then it arrives in a library and someone comes in the library and they're then someone's gonna be mad about it. Like get Ben. No, it's already here. It's everywhere. It's like, sorry, you're too late, man. That's what I think.
Okay, well, I'm happy that we are ending the talk with some laughter.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I did get very heavy with some of this stuff because it's a heavy book and there's some heavy stuff and like I didn't even get into some of the things. Like I did want to like portray. You asked what I wanted people to take out of it. I did want to portray what harassment felt like the reality of it for people. And I'm glad that some people pointed out like this is what it feels like in a very real way, because some people still have the notion that like it's some other thing that is just not as like kind of insidious as it is. That it's like I don't know, that like sexual assault is like somebody jumping out of a bush still or something. It's like
yeah. Well, and you did it like you mentioned earlier the two Kates, like the Kate in the book that was 22 and the Kate now that's 39, and I thought that was so prevalent in you like in those scenes where you are experiencing sexual violence and you're kind of feeling powerlessness and shame and passiveness, and then in your afterward you're like powerful and showing strength and just like throwing it all out there. Like it was like the complete position. Like you just showed the two Kates that you are.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I didn't handle all those questions super well. It's hard on the spot, to be honest with you, about some of those heavy hitters. And I often get tongue tied on them, but you try your best.
I think that you handled them beautifully. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah. I got more time. If you want to end on a better note, I'll that too. I got a few more minutes.
Do you want to tell a joke? I don't know. I've got nothing else.
There we go. Let me put questions up here on the side. Let me see if there's a funny
Yeah,
one.
we do have some that we couldn't get to. So,
Have I been back to the oil sands? No, I have not. I have not. It's an expensive ticket, but I have been on planes where you can definitely tell that people are coming back from the oil sands, and so has my sister who lived in Edmonton. I had two sisters that lived, one in Edmonton and one in Calgary, and they're always like, whenever you come home, there are people definitely like in the oil sands coming back, and like the people recognize each other on the plane and stuff, and it's kind of like especially at Christmas time. So so there's always like a little like homecoming on the planes, and they're like, oh hey, all fired up to go home or what? It can be nice. Was I inspired by Michael Rabagliati? Yes, of course. I read all kinds of comics, especially the autobiographical ones before I made this. I was inspired by Alison Bechdel's books, especially how she tried to format her memories like in a spreadsheet. If you can look that up and see how she was doing that when I was trying to organize my thoughts in the very beginning. I didn't end up doing it exactly like she did, but it was a useful tool in the beginning to try and like organize like memories into like actual chapters and stuff. And then you mentioned if I had any other graphic novel, all kinds of autobiographical, and I look for working class narratives as well. But you know what? There aren't that many of them, and or there's less of them. There's less of them than you would think. And I was always like sort of voraciously looking for working class narratives. And I know people will be like, you did Little Factory Summers, but that just came out. And there, I hope that there will be more of them now that this book has been successful. That I think that we're in dire need of working class narratives because like it's just so many artists do come from those backgrounds, but those stories aren't told as often. I'm sorry, I'm just going through these questions. Are more and more Canadians protesting the existence of Fort Mary and tar sands site due to environmental concerns? There's more discussion of it. There's definitely, like, there was the pipeline protests, but it is a highly intense political hot potato because oil and gas in Alberta is such a big employer, and because Alberta is so pro oil and gas. If you are anti oil and gas, you are seen as anti-Albertan to a lot of people. It's kind of like, the analog is often that Alberta is Canada's Texas. So if you can imagine that, kind of like saying anti-oil, anti-Texas sort of thing. It's difficult to have the conversation in Canada, even though people trying to. It's hard to facilitate change because of the attachment to oil and gas that exists in Alberta. The ending of the book was so powerful and left me speechless. It made me choke up in tears. Oh, thank you. Can you tell us more about how you decided to end the story? I won't spoil the ending for anybody, but honestly, it was just, I had a few endings paged out, and I gave them to my publisher, and they were like, this one, this is the one. So in a sense, they chose it because it was difficult to know. It's hard to know when to stop. It's very hard to know when to stop. So, but when they pointed it out, I was like, oh yes, that does work the best. So I got to hand it to them because, as you can see, I'm quite long-winded, and I will just keep going. I did want to address all the questions, so I'm glad I did.
Yeah, thank you for staying on to answer those extra questions. That's awesome. We appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for being here this evening. I also want to extend a huge thank you to all of our viewers and everyone who submitted questions for the author talk today. Without your support, none of this would be possible. So we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, below the live stream video, you can find a link to Kate's book. So make sure you click that resources button. We look forward to seeing you all again on April 27th when we chat with the New York Times bestselling crime thriller author William Kent Kruger about his most recent book, Fox Creek. You can register for this and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I am Brandon Adler, and thank you for joining us this evening with Kate Beaton.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
See ya.